The following program is presented by the Metropolitan Library Service Agency.
Hello, welcome to All About Kids, a program focusing on the interests of children and young people and some of the issues affecting them. Our guest today, 7th District Hennepin County Commissioner Emily Ann Staples, will be discussing the report and recommendations of the Hennepin County Suburban Adolescent Health Task Force. The intention of the task force was to make recommendations on how Hennepin County can enhance the health of adolescents and support the development of resilient teens. Commissioner Emily Ann Staples, it's a pleasure to have you on All About Kids today. And it's exciting to be able to talk about a product of the Hennepin County Board of Commissioners, your recently published survey on adolescent health needs and issues. And the thing that excites me as a children's services librarian is you didn't just listen to the pundits, the experts. You actually went out and talked to young people 12 to 17 or 18 in suburban Hennepin County. What's the background?
Well, Gretchen, it's really a delight to be here. I'm just tickled. What we did, I was really concerned. I chair the Health Committee of the Hennepin County Board of Commissioners, and one of the things that we've really focused on is that how few services are available to adolescents and teenagers. So as we started looking at an underserved population, we realized that these are the people we have not been hearing from a great deal. So last year, in 1993, when I was looking at where we could really look at health promotion and long-term gains in understanding what young people are facing, it seemed appropriate to engage young people in a whole variety of community resources in looking at their health futures. And so that was really the background or the thinking behind establishing this Adolescent Health Task Force.
And you actually went out into the schools and you found some rather startling things. For instance, that sophisticated as we think our young people are, they don't know a lot about what their health needs are or what to do about issues of sexuality.
Well, they really depend more on peers, I think, than on other resources for information. We really did. We had two members of this, our 14-person task force were young people, one from Osseo High School, one from Minnetonka High School, who was the co-chair of the commission. And I have a high regard for young people knowing their own situation, knowing what they need, and being able to express it. And so not only did we have our task force membership, including young people, but then we went into the schools and had fabulous information sessions from the youth, and they also then made a presentation to the Hennepin County Board when we did the final presentation in November of the task force report.
That's an opportunity that terrifies most grown people.
Oh, and they were so good. I mean, they were really just absolutely terrific in explaining and exploring what their needs are, and we were really, I think, sensitive to the fact that as we're looking overall at what we can do for the future, we really need to pay attention to what's happening to young people in our communities. And they often are not heard as clearly as spokespeople for them, who sometimes may not be quite as tuned in as they are themselves.
Well, one of the things that comes across clearly in the report is that young people's access to health services is limited because of transportation. Young people don't want always to go to the doctors they visited since childhood. They have those issues of privacy that they would prefer to see someone that perhaps doesn't know mother and dad. Income levels.
Well, this came off loud and clear.
Access.
Number one concern is transportation, and that really in Minneapolis schools, the high schools have clinics in the schools, and in the suburban schools that really is not, we do not have clinics in our suburban high schools.
Well, that was something that interested me because I think one of the survey respondents said they're not allowed access into the suburban schools. Is there a particular reason?
True. I mean, well, Minneapolis through the school system has funded clinics in the suburban schools. Of course, we've got a number of school districts in the suburbs, and that just has not occurred up to this point. There is a Bloomington Bloomington, Edina, and Richfield have a separate health department, but even at that, why there's still no concerted effort to have clinics in the schools, and it's a funding issue as much as and an access issue. But as the young people were talking about where they would like to see services, they'd certainly like to see them in shopping centers. I mean, the malls would be ideal because kids can get to the malls. They know how to do that, but when there are offices that are separate, that's not really as easy to get to.
And the thing that does come through time and again in the report is that young people simply don't know what's available. They don't know where to go to get the kind of information. We like to think that as adults we're providing all kinds of information for our young people, and obviously we're missing the boat someplace. And of course, as a librarian, that concerns me a lot.
Well, and I think that certainly concerns us. Part of it, and also, but you mentioned the privacy issues and the insurance issues, that sometimes young people, when they need to have some kinds of health services and they don't want to particularly have their parents know about it, they're not going to be covered by insurance, and particularly if their parents are employed. And the insurance issues are another major issue, a block for kids to receive services. And they certainly identified that very clearly. Then they're getting their information a lot of time from their peers, which is terrific if the peers are knowledgeable, but sometimes the information they're receiving is really not accurate information. And I mean, I sort of remember my own growing up period, and you don't really know who to ask. Lots of these kids have learned from their parents. They really do have a lot of respect for their access to fathers and mothers, but some of the issues are really, they're not as comfortable with talking to their parents or to their teachers, and there really is a need for them to have some other avenue to
sort of a neutral
explore.
Place where you can talk to another adult that you trust. You mentioned young people's willingness to talk to parents, or comfort level talking to parents, and I thought that was very, very encouraging. I think 9 out of 10 students that were surveyed said that they think that their parents care for them very deeply, and that's terrifically encouraging.
That was a state survey, which was really very. There were a lot of the information that we used came from a state survey that was done in 1993. So that provided us some of the background, and then quite a bit of work had been done by the Hennepin County Health Department doing some surveys too, so we used that information in the report as well.
One of the unfortunate things was the teachers didn't seem to come out quite as highly in terms of children feeling the teachers cared about them. Did the students make any comments about why that was?
Part of it is the teachers have so many demands placed on them, and there are so many mandates in the schools that it really is, it's tough for the teachers to make one-to-one kind, particularly in the junior highs or middle schools and the high schools, when they've got the class sizes that they've got and the continuing numbers of students that they're working with, that it's very tough for them to form any kind of a relationship with individual students, maybe one or two, but by and large, that's difficult.
One of the things, too, that came across is that there are some rather serious mental health issues affecting young people.
I think when we overall looked at the physical health of the children and the young people, it seems to be better taken care of than the mental health, but just even understanding or addressing some of the stress that they're under, the pressures that they're under to achieve. I mean, I just don't think we recognize what so often we're doing to our young people in terms of they have to earn some money. They're looking, certainly, many of them, at college expectations and job market, and we do overlook, and I think sometimes underestimate, the stress and the mental health pressures that they're under. 10% of young people who answered the survey said that they had thought about or attempted suicide. Now, I think that's plenty scary.
It's very frightening in a time of life when we as adults think they should be just having lots of fun. Adolescent sexuality issues certainly came through, and again, in connection with the mental health issues that young people who are exploring their sexuality as gay, lesbian, or bisexual sometimes are the kids most prone to thoughts of suicide. I think it's courageous that your task force addressed those issues so specifically.
Well, I think that was one of the things that we very early on, as we were beginning meeting, we realized that we had to look at all of the issues across the board, and sometimes these are overlooked. But also just responsible sexuality, both for young men and for young women, and the pressures young women often feel that they're under to respond sexually when they really aren't ready to, don't want to, but it's, again, young women being popular, being accepted, and understanding the responsibility that that brings to them too. So those are the other issues. I mean, early pregnancy is something that we really talked about, and some of the young women who talk to us really don't think adults understand what is occurring to them. Young men, and young women, but the young men, it's macho and it's really important, but the young women don't understand how to say, no, I can't do that, particularly if they're under a great deal of pressure.
And again, for adults, we thought that was something that was taken care of in the 60s and 70s, now that women have the ability to say no, but
and also another thing that's fairly scary, though, is that young men don't necessarily want to use protection, and young women don't have a great deal of access to some kinds of protection. So it's they're much more likely to go have sexual encounters unprotected than maybe they're somewhat older, not peers, but the older brothers and sisters, because they don't understand. They don't even want to ask. I mean, it's access to information as well.
Well, one of the things that again correlates with that is the very strong recommendations that there be much more education for parents of preschoolers and parents K through 12. And sometimes I think once we get our children launched in school and they're doing okay, you think that your need for continued education as a parent stops. And so it's encouraging to see that you're saying even parents of adolescents need to know the developmental stages. They need to know what's happening, and then they'll be better able to help their children get through these years.
Well, we hope so. I mean, and obviously, since we're here at the library, why, that's one of the Gretchen. I mean,
the library fits in everywhere.
But it is true that there are some really excellent materials available to assist parents doing this. But there's also some early education programs for parents that I think sort of hook them into understanding that this is a constant situation, that you really peer groups of young people and parents together can do some very excellent kinds of things. Another thing that the task force found out is that the young people who have some kind of connection with either a church situation or some kind of a religious or a spiritual hook-in tend to do better, tend to have a little bit more groundedness, which I think we've known for years, but that certainly then was reinforced.
That was interesting because you used the word spirituality in the report, and again, that's something that we don't often hear from governmental bodies. Actually,
well, and this didn't come from the governmental body.
It came from the people. Yes.
This came from the task force, and this came from some of the. We've had youth-serving ministers as a part of the task force, and they were really very helpful in identifying some of the needs and some of the ways that young people today are really seeking and searching, and that certainly has an impact on mental and, obviously, as an outgrowth of that, physical health.
I think it's exciting to see our Board of Commissioners addressing all these sorts of issues in a very holistic way. And of course, this goes right along with one of the major objectives or initiatives of the board right now, the School Social Services Redesign Initiative, and that's mentioned a couple of times in the report. It's a little off the track, but do you want to
Oh, well, I'd love to talk about it a little bit, because we've been working on that, and that's a collaboration. So many of these things I think are really exciting, are collaborations. And the School Social Services Redesign is a collaboration between Hennepin County, Minneapolis, the Robbinsdale School District, Minneapolis School District, and the United Way of Minneapolis, of Greater Minneapolis, trying to work within the school system to see that social services are provided where they're really necessary, and one of the certainly most important places to find out where they're necessary is schools and through young people. So that's the pilot sites are already at work in both the city of Minneapolis and in Robbinsdale, also in Hopkins, which has joined in of its own volition. So we're now looking at the permanent kind of a governance structure to see to it that the suburban school districts as well as Minneapolis school districts are going to benefit.
Well, what I think is so exciting about that is the recognition not only of the county board, but of the county administrator, that all county departments, including the library, have a role to play in seeing to it that lives are made better for children and families in our communities. Well, whether it's literacy or health services, we're all in there together.
Well, and one of the things that's exciting about that, we do have a new county administrator, Jim Burry, who's been there now this being about 7 months as we move into 1994. But he has really broadened, instead of being very vertical, the way the county was organized in the past, much more horizontal, so that people are working with other departments, and people in the social services department are working with people in the health department, are working with across the boards, juvenile justice and the whole juvenile serving criminal justice area, looking at how you can, this Adolescent Health Task Force also addresses some of the violence, for instance, and how we address, that's one of the major concerns of many of the young people. Violence on buses, violence in schools.
And you talk about violence in the media and incorrect sexual images that kids get from the media.
Absolutely, but the county is looking at trying to do these across divisions and departments rather than each dealing individually the way it has too often been done in the past.
One of the things you're concerned about is after-school programming for young people so that they have something to do when you bring in Hennepin County Park and Rec.
Absolutely.
So
but that's another thing young people identified themselves. The school day is really very short. One of the things I've been concerned about for years is the length of the school year and the length of the school day compared to other nations, but also just because we have a tremendous opportunity that I don't think we're taking advantage of. But then there are opportunities to do things after the school day is over, and if it's over at 2:30 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, lots of these young people go home to empty homes because obviously their parents are working, and it's time, productive time, we could be doing some really exciting things with, and park and recs and libraries and some of the other services of the county could be really brought to bear in, I think, a way that would be far more beneficial for the young people, and also then for the long term for their parents.
And the community is happy.
Yeah,
Idle
all these
minds
things.
are the devil's workshop, the old adage. One of the things that you've spoken about in the task force is prevention kinds of things, and you came with a very interesting button today.
I did, and
we're all concerned at the number of young people who have begun to smoke, particularly girls, I think.
Well, smoke and drink. Part of access to drugs, but still alcohol is one of the one of the easiest drugs to access, and we're really concerned about
your
young
statistics
people
were
drinking.
frightening, the number of kids who say they drink to the point of passing out at least once a week.
And that's not very responsible drinking. That's...
or they think they can drink and drive. And again, all the sorts of education that we think we as adults have been doing just don't.
We may not have been. And then now the initiative Hennepin County is taking is Send the Camel Packing, which is an initiative to try and get young people to understand that if they begin smoking early, they may find that that's an addiction that's really difficult to break, and it's becoming very expensive. But it's when we realize that young people are identifying Joe Camel to almost the extent that they identify Mickey Mouse, it's as the cigarette advertisers have been very successful. And so as more and more we're recognizing the hazards of tobacco smoke, even secondhand tobacco smoke, why that's been one of the other initiatives that we've been. This is sort of a separate initiative from a consortium of organizations that are looking at smoke-free environments, and certainly the county has become a smoke-free environment, and more and more restaurants are becoming smoke-free environments, and so that's just another part of the whole health. But nutrition is another whole area that we were looking at as well, and trying to encourage healthy eating and recognizing early healthy lifestyles and the pressures that are on young women to be very svelte and slim, and that sometimes doesn't lend itself to good eating habits. So a lot of this is health promotion, but a lot of it is just recognizing across the board, and we've made recommendations to a whole variety of levels of government, from the state to
the county attorney's office,
to the county attorney's office, but then to libraries, and to the school system. So that one of the things we're going to do, we're having our final meeting of I'm not sure final, but we're having a meeting of the Adolescent Health Task Force now in January 1994 to try and implement some of the recommendations we've made, one of which is to have an ongoing body that will be making recommendations and address these in a sort of assess how we're moving.
That was a terrific idea, because so often reports like this, you spend a lot of time and a lot of money developing them, they go onto someone's shelf and nothing is ever done, but you've made some very, very clear recommendations for the implementation, and the fact that there will be an oversight committee which is going to apparently include a couple of adolescents and a couple
Absolutely.
of parents. So
Well, and the adolescents are the ones who really bring in, or the young people are the ones who really bring in the focus of how they feel this needs to be moving forward. And so, yes, absolutely, that will be a continued part of it. And then we do have funding in the 1994 county budget to implement some of the recommendations, particularly transportation. We've got about $10,000 to do some kinds of transportation, whether it's by calling
A
it taxis.
health-mobile?
Well, I think it'll probably be more individualized, because that's what we recognize, that young people really don't know how to get the individualized transportation from where they are to where they need to be. So that's one of the things that we hope will be implemented very soon.
and that's very practical.
Well, and
That's
we're trying to
very-
be as practical as possible, and recognizing that with limited dollar, we want to extend the dollars as advantageously as we can.
Well, again, one of the things about having young people themselves involved in the implementation, those of us who work with young people or our parents realize that peers have a great deal more influence on actions and behaviors than adults. So to have kids understand that this is something that's coming from them is terribly important. And I thought it shows a great deal of respect, I think, on the part of you as chair of the task force and the other members, recognizing it's not easy always to accept the opinions or advice of someone who is younger.
Oh, I
and,
think
you know,
of course, they are so terrific. I mean, that is really the thing that I've been struck with through the years, is that we really and truly have fabulous, fabulous opportunities with young people to really give them a grounding and a base of responsible governance. And by giving them some of this experience and working, it's a learning situation both ways. It was certainly a learning situation with the adults on the task force and the young people, who are just spectacular.
Well, and then it gives them some confidence in their government, in their community, that they are heard, that they do have a voice.
Well, we hope so.
So after, what are some of the other things that you think can be implemented without a great deal of, dare I say, extra tax dollars, or you're going to be doing some things that are practical kind of things that each agency can
trying to move
work
into the school. We're working very closely in collaboration with the public health, the county public health department, and so that there are some initiatives that are already going forward in the Department of Health, and so working with a whole variety of the programs that are already underway. Moving, though, we hope toward at least one or two suburban clinics within the suburban school districts, and trying to implement, moving together some of the programs that are already underway into more accessible space, more accessible areas where, for instance, downtown there's the Red Door Clinic, where young people really recognize that as a place where they can go with confidentiality, but recognizing certainly the need for confidentiality, also doing some work with the insurance providers to see that some of the young people who really need some funding will have access to that, maybe separate, realizing how they don't necessarily always need to get on the parents' insurance coverage. I mean, just a variety of recommendations that we're now going to have to work with more closely, and see in different directions how we can make them work more effectively.
Copies of the report are available from your office.
Copies of the report are available from 2400 Government Center, 55487.
And people can check with their local public library too. I think we'll make them
hope so.
available in our pamphlet files. How do you see this fitting in with some of the proposed national health plans?
Well, certainly the prevention area is one of the areas that we're most, I think, recognizing. And the mental health area is one that we're looking at the national recommendations and seeing to it that mental health is really a major concern for young people, and that how that will come down the pike, I'm not totally sure, but we're certainly going to work with this. And of course, it also fits in to Minnesota Care, and as the legislature looks at implementing Minnesota Care, which it will probably take a substantial amount of time to do thoroughly, but the rules and regulations, we hope, will recognize some of the recommendations coming from the task force. But I think the health promotion and the recognizing special needs of young people is one of the things we hope to help implement and keep a focus on.
Do you have any idea of whether this sort of thing is going on in any other places in Minnesota or the country, or is this kind of an initiative of Hennepin County.
I'm sure it's going on. We didn't really check in other parts of the country, but some of the background for this task force was some of the work that's already been done in the state of Minnesota, some of the surveys that have been done, some of the recognition, some of the looks at people, the changing aspect. I mean, the changing. Certainly violence is something that is, and the kind of violence is something that's quite new to our society. Access to guns is access to knives. I mean, just also the whole drug culture is something that we're looking at, trying to prevent, recognizing that we can maybe make an intervention in that and try and encourage young people to not start taking drugs and giving them some self-confidence is one of the things that came through young people's recognition of their own self-worth and self-confidence. And if we can encourage that.
I think that question is, am I normal? That came across as the second most important after getting into college. Am I normal was the
well,
and
I think that there are huge questions that people are not, that young people are really not being able to get sometimes the confidence that they really are strong, effective people, and that's something that we can certainly stress and help encourage in a whole variety of ways.
Well, it's been exciting talking to you about this, and certainly those of us who work with children and their families are going to be watching with great interest the implementation of your recommendations. And thank you very much for not only being on the program, but for addressing this crucial need of kids in suburban Hennepin County.
Oh, Gretchen, well, thank you for having me, because I really would like to have this out and people aware of it as much as possible. So I'm thrilled to be here.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Emily Ann Staples. We look forward to the implementation of the recommendations of the Hennepin County Suburban Adolescent Health Task Force. Thanks to all of you for joining us on All About Kids. Please tune in again.
This has been a presentation of Hennepin County Library in conjunction with the Twin Cities Metropolitan Library Service Agency. We thank you for watching, and we hope you visit your public library often.